To bid a final farewell to late former president of that country, Robert Mugabe. Peter Ndoro joins us now live from there. Manero Akanaka, Peter, described the scenes in Harare earlier today as world leaders gathered to pay their respects to former president of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe.
Manero Akanaka, thanks so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to everybody. We are in the center of Harare, and the night has fallen, of course, the sun has set, and it's been quite a day, and I would say mixed emotions, obviously, but certainly at the stadium there was tributes being paid to the former president by heads of state, former heads of state and other dignitaries that have come from far and wide across the continent and other countries as well, with representatives as far afield as Russia, China, even Nicaragua were represented at the stadium today. So we saw, we heard, and in the end, I think it was a fitting farewell for the founding father of Zimbabwe, and right at the end, perhaps symbolically, 95 peace doves were released into the sky, and that is how the curtain closed on the funeral today.
Peter, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa issuing an apology for the violence that people have been experiencing in South Africa. How was that received?
All right, it was quite a remarkable thing. When he came into the stadium earlier, I thought I heard boos, but because the band was playing at the time, it wasn't quite clear, it wasn't very distinct. But when he was called up to do his speech, they started booing and jeering almost straight away, and it was quite clear that Zimbabweans were reacting to the xenophobic violence and the scenes that we'd seen in the country last week. But the president persevered, and after a intercession by one of the priests, the crowd still didn't listen, and they carried on jeering. But the president took to the podium, he started talking, and then during the speech, he turned to the crowd and he apologized, and he says, "We're sorry for what's happening in South Africa." And literally in that apology, the jeers turned to cheers, and he won over the crowd because I think they felt his sincerity, and they are looking to the promises that he made, that he will work very hard to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen again. So it was an interesting day, but I think the apology went a long, long way, and it was well received by the crowd that was at the stadium earlier this afternoon.
Peter, normally with a funeral service, we see a burial almost immediately afterwards. What's taking place now?
All right, so it's been an interesting thing. We're not quite sure what the major problem is. On the one hand, you hear that the president is going to be buried on a very special place at Heroes Acre, not one of the areas that had been pre-designated some time ago, and that they're building a special construction, almost shrine-like, and that will take at least 30 days to complete. So that's the one story that we're hearing. The other as well is that the chiefs, because he is a chief himself, he was anointed one soon before he became prime minister, and the chiefs there and the elders say that chiefs have to be buried in a certain way, and procedures had to be followed, and so they weren't quite happy with the way things that had been arranged by the state. But I think in the end, the nephew of President Robert Mugabe spoke to us and said, look, he will be buried at Heroes Acre, most definitely, and that the only delay really is about this construction of this special shrine that is being built even as we speak, I understand. So it's unusual, for sure, a bit of tradition and culture mixed with just the logistics of building a shrine as the final solution, I think, to questions that were being asked behind the scenes about where exactly he will be positioned at Heroes Acre for his burial. So we expect it will happen sometime within the next 30 days.
Peter, when we've been speaking to people from Zimbabwe before the funeral service that's taken place, the concern has always been power and the way that things are operating. With a deluge of world leaders there, talk to us about what you've seen and experienced when it comes to power and security in Zimbabwe.
I didn't quite catch that. If you could just say that again.
Talk to us about the power situation there. How has that been working out? And has there been increased police and security visibility on the streets of Harare in the lead up to the funeral today?
All right, so what we've been seeing, honestly, it's a normal kind of security level. You would imagine with 11 sitting heads of state, former heads of state, security will be quite high. Harare Central is very, very quiet this evening, which is unusual. Normally it's a hive of activity. The stadium itself also was quiet. It wasn't full. And I was trying to get to the bottom of that, and they're suggesting that people were a little confused about the idea that this was going to be just for the VIPs because the public viewings were taking place at another stadium. So, yes, there was a police presence around the city, but no more so than would be for the kind of delegates and delegations that were present at the funeral this afternoon. And just going back to that funeral, what I forgot to say, I think there was a couple of emotional moments that played out during the funeral. It began with Walter Chidakwa, who's a former minister, and was talking on behalf of the family. And he spoke about the contribution that the president had made over the years. But he said that towards the end of his life, he was a sad man, a very sad man who recalled quietly the journey that he had walked, a profound journey and a hard and excruciating journey. And I think that really talks more about how he was removed from power and the challenges that he faced being marginalized. So it was perhaps not a great way to end such a long life, where the family representative said that he was very sad towards the end. Then Kenneth Kaunda, who's coincidentally the very same age as President Mugabe when he died, 95, when they were viewing the body, President Kaunda seemed to spend quite a bit of time with President Mugabe and was speaking to him. So that was quite an emotional thing. And then, of course, the doves that were released, 95 of them, to mark his 95 years. Then, of course, all the pomp and ceremony, 21 gun salute, the highest honor that can be afforded to a former commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The presidents that were there, the speeches makers there, all kind of singing from the same hymn sheet, saying that President Mugabe was a true African, a nationalist, one who served the continent and spoke a lot just beyond Zimbabwe's borders. But in Zimbabwe, the President Mnangagwa spoke about how he was a principled man and how important some of his contributions were, including, of course, the controversial land reform. So it's been quite a day, but answering your first question, not abnormal in terms of who was around the security presence.
Peter Ndoro, my colleague, coming to us live from Harare. They're giving us an update on the funeral of the former president of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe, who passed away at age 95. It's time for a short break. I'll have more news for you after that. Do stay with us on